Alright, howdy folks, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Men of War 2. Though the multiplayer playtest for Men of War 2 lasted just a few days, Carly and myself got a decent number of games in, and I wanted to make this video discussing what I thought were the good, bad, and downright ugly things in Men of War 2 so far, what I have seen. Before we get into that, however, there is no way of ignoring the massive wave of negative comments on my Mode 2 videos, those of other creators, and on the Men of War 2 Discord. I understand why quite a few people are upset or surprised to see the direction taken by Mode 2, and I don't think the developers themselves expected such a huge negative outcry. I do agree with some of the things that were said in general, but at the same time, I honestly had a lot of fun while playing the test. I plan to make a video down the line where I want to compare Gates of Hell with Men of War Assault Squad 1 and 2, as well as Men of War 2. Currently though, I'm holding off on this until we get to see some of Men of War 2 single player or co-op content before I really think I can compare them. Keep in mind though that according to the developers, what we saw during this playtest was only a part of Men of War 2 and obviously wasn't the full experience. Whether this means we can also expect regular, larger scale PvP battles with more units per player on the field is still a question. The lower amount of units per player, as well as the quality of the graphics, seem to be the two most talked about things in the comments. Let's start off with the good. Match impact / micro skill. You don't control dozens or hundreds of soldiers, vehicles, and emplacements. You're just controlling a few guys or at most 2 or 3 vehicles at a time. This means you can really focus on what these units are doing at any given time and thus really make the most of them. Basically, if you're good at microing your units, you should really be able to have an above average impact in the battle, even in a 5v5 game, just because of the low amount of units on the field per player. I will say that this is mostly about tank gameplay, though it's applicable to some of the infantry gameplay as well. Personally, I didn't really play a ton of the artillery divisions as I found the gameplay just kind of boring, but I'll definitely touch on my opinions on artillery later on in this video. Then the division / battle group system. I have played a ton of Steel Division 1 and 2 and Wargame Ireland Battle as well as Red Dragon, so creating a deck to enter battle with was quite familiar to me. I personally really like this aspect, though I do find there are some downsides which I do want to discuss later on in this video. In Vanilla and Rob's in Assault Squad, you just selected a nation and you and everyone on your team would have access to the same units. Then Gates of Hell added the Doctrine system, which meant that each faction had a few small variations in their call-in roster, but nothing too big. In Mode 2, you definitely have a huge variety in the call-in possibilities between the 3 different types of divisions, but you can also have a large variety between even 2 players who are both, for example, playing as the 1st German Infantry Division. This means that your opponent won't really know what units you have selected until he actually sees them, something that makes every game just feel a little bit different. Then there's the Frontline mode, and I have to say that this new game mode that was available, which was kind of a copy of the Steel Division style mode, was a lot of fun. Now, instead of just some arbitrary flags on the map like you have in Assault Zones, you actually had to push across the entire map as a team, and you couldn't just focus on really one area, or you'd risk creating a salient which your opponents could then exploit by shooting you in the flanks. The fortification and entrenching, and in general a couple of the quality of life updates were fantastic. The 3-tier foxhole system, as well as the entrenching system for infantry, vehicles, and emplacements is just fantastic. A very positive addition to the series, one which took the clunkiness I was used to from Assault Squad and even Gates of Hell, and basically just totally got rid of it in the fortification and entrenching department. The building / urban warfare part of Mode 2 is done, I think, very well. Though I was still trying to learn the ins and outs of the finer workings of the charge and storm building mechanics, I did really enjoy infantry combat due to the changes to building / urban warfare. I actually had just made a video where I was talking about how Gates of Hell made such a great improvement over a lot of areas from Men of War Assault Squad 2, besides the honestly horrible infantry in buildings gameplay. I was hoping to see something more akin to Command & Conquer or even Company of Heroes, where a building just becomes an entity. Now Mode 2 did just that, where infantry just occupies a building, figures out the best location to engage infantry from inside that building, and will even engage in hand-to-hand melee combat if enemies come inside of the building. Grenades can be thrown in or out, units can be told to storm occupied buildings. It made for a great change from an otherwise very clunky system that I was used to for Men of War Assault Squad and Gates of Hell's Urban Warfare. Very quickly, do want to touch on infantry being able to shoot on the move. It's a big gameplay change, allowing infantry to be dangerous while advancing, so you can actually fire while advancing. You don't have to stop, shoot, move, stop, shoot, move. A great addition. Love to see that in Gates of Hell some point down the line. I know it was in there, and I think they removed it for AI reasons. The matching system and also reconnecting the multiplayer are two huge features that I would have loved to have almost a decade ago in Assault Squad 2. As someone who has thousands of hours between Assault Squad 1 and 2, with a lot of those in multiplayer, I hope I never find out how many hours of my life I wasted sitting in lobbies trying to even make a 2v2 happen, let alone a bigger game like a 5v5 as we see here in Mode 2. In Mode 2, you just select your division, click battle, and the game finds you teammates and opponents. Of course, a classic lobby system is available, which is great, but if you just want to get on at night, play a quick game or two, you can do so via this matching system, which makes it very easy, and I really do appreciate that. Another massive upgrade is the fact that if you disconnect from the game for any reason, you can actually reconnect to the battle. After the good, there are also some things that I just did not enjoy about Men of War 2. First up, the graphics. Now I know that the developers of Men of War 2 are not the same developers as the people behind Assault Squad 1 and 2, who are also again different from the people who are creating Gates of Hell. I know it's complicated, and I do want to really go over this in my comparison video down the line, but the graphics are definitely of a less high quality than what we've seen in Gates of Hell. I do think that they are better than what we have in Assault Squad 2. I was honestly just hoping for something a bit better. It is 2023, and a lot of the graphics just kind of weren't really doing it for me. The division system, which I mentioned as a good thing, I also want to mention as a bad thing. And as much as I liked the idea behind it, there are some big downsides to it as well. Not being able to contest every sector on a map as effectively, think a tank player in a town or an infantry player on a big open field, can be frustrating, especially if you're playing by yourself as part of a larger team and your teammates don't seem to be playing to their strengths. In Assault Squad, you can contest any terrain anywhere, as you have access to all units, or basically almost all the units if you're talking Gates of Hell. In Men of War 2, you have to rely a lot more on your teammates. You also have to hope that they have built their division effectively and that they created a somewhat rounded deck within the realms of possibility to actually bring into battle. Having an artillery player on your team who thinks he only should be spamming artillery is downright frustrating. In Assault Squad 2 and Gates of Hell, you can definitely rely on your teammates to be mostly self-sufficient regarding holding or attacking their flank unit-wise, but in Mode 2 you have to play along with your team to become victorious. The Incursion mode. And as much as I thought that the new Frontline mode, though kind of copied over from Steel Division, was fun and fit decently inside Mode 2, the Incursion mode, which is very similar to the Frontline mode from Assault Squad 1 and 2, I know the names here are just super confusing, and I don't know why they keep reusing them and just not come up with their own names, but in Men of War Assault Squad, playing the old Frontline game mode, you would either defend or attack first, and after a certain amount of time, or if the attacker completed their objectives, you would switch sides. This meant that you would always get to play as both the attacker and the defender. The Incursion game mode just has one team defend and one team attack without switching. It is a very weird twist on this beloved mode, and it honestly makes me wonder how many people are actively wanting to be attackers if they never get to switch to be a defender as well. Running out of units is something that has not happened to me, but something that we did run into when it was content creators versus developers was just the issue of having no more units left. I believe it was Diplex who after 25 or so minutes just left his computer and got kicked for being AFK as he had no units left to request in his deck. I understand that throwing your men or units away willy-nilly shouldn't be encouraged, but with the 3-tiered call-in system right now, I think a very cheap conscript/recruit like infantry squad should be available for the player to call in every few minutes or so in the 3rd tier. Just any sort of unit so players feel engaged even if they might have had a particularly bad match or just got very unlucky and are left without any units when there's still time left to play. I want to get this one over with really quickly. The fact that there's vehicle health bars that are visible is just a weird choice. Now, I think that everybody understands that a similar mechanic does exist to a degree in Gates of Hell and even Assault Squad, but it's just not a great idea, I think, to show it. Something that just puts a huge arcade stamp on the game, which is weird because they're calling it Men of War. And if I think Men of War, I don't think arcade to the point where we see vehicle health bars. They could still be there. I just don't think that they should be visible whatsoever. Now let's talk about the airstrikes. I was just not a huge fan of these airstrikes because it meant that every time you pushed aggressively, you're most likely going to get strafed, bombed, or rocketed by some sort of airplane. The easy, but sort of not really actual solution is to bring an anti-aircraft platform with you. However, the stronger anti-aircraft platforms like Flak 88 are very slow and cumbersome and basically artillery food. Back when I played a ton of Assault Squad 2, I knew one thing: defend your line. The last thing you want is for an enemy to either push infantry or worse, some sort of light vehicle behind your line on the flank and come into your rear area where they can ambush even the heaviest of tanks, your artillery. Now, what they've done here with the Frontline system is that your units are automatically, sort of magically spotted the second they cross the front line. They're going to be constantly spotted for all enemy players. This means that you can no longer make a hole in their defensive line, push through an armored car after taking out their anti-tank rifles and AT emplacements, and then actually get to wreak havoc on their artillery players. Now, there are certain infantry units that do not get auto-spotted when they do cross the front line, but I don't understand why these sneaky armored car, hell, even light vehicles or Jeep rushes have to be handicapped as much as they are in the game currently. Now we've reached the ugly part where I'm going to be basically ranting for a good couple of seconds, just things that I absolutely despise about the playtest, and I'm just hoping that they'll consider looking at. This is sort of a 2-in-1. The fact that there is no max range and the insane amount of artillery spam and how viable the artillery spam did feel. When I realized that any artillery or armor piece could shoot at any range across the map, though be it with some form of reduced accuracy, I was just flabbergasted. Now I'm aware that far shooting has existed in previous Men of War games, which allow players to kind of use a bug to shoot past the max range, and I kind of never figured this, but honestly the solution to that should not be to give everyone access to far shooting instead. A Storm Tiger can fire its massive 380mm rocket straight across the map with all consequences that come with it. Mortars, rocket artillery, regular howitzers, but also tanks don't have any max range. I actually shot an enemy artillery piece across the map with my King Tiger over 400 meters away. It did take about 6 to 8 shots to get a hit though, but the oppressiveness of heavy artillery pieces, usually over about 150 millimeters or more, is honestly terrible. Even a miss with a large enough caliber artillery piece, or worse, a barrage of rockets from a Calliope or a Panzerwerfer, is just an atrocious thing to deal with, mostly as an infantry player. Now, these slow maneuvering infantrymen emplacements like anti-tank guns, mortars, Flak 88s, it's just food for artillery players who sometimes buy nothing but quite literally just artillery and ammo trucks. I sincerely disagree with the developers that artillery and tanks shouldn't have max ranges. It makes for a horrible experience where certain units, like these slow and placed weapons, are barely viable, and playing infantry is an actual mental battle to see how long you can last against artillery spammers. Last but not least, I feel like this is made worse by the fact that infantry has atrocious range, where most of the anti-tank weapons that are held by infantry only go about 30 meters, with a few exceptions, which means that a good tank player can really keep his tank alive as long as he dodges the airstrikes and the heavy artillery. So Men of War 2 was definitely received quite negatively. I myself did really enjoy the game for what it showed so far, a fast-paced, micromanaged focused RTS, which in the multiplayer playtest completely focused on, kind of no surprise here, PvP. I do hope that the full release of the game will have other PvP modes where people can have more units on the field at any given time, similar to what we saw in Assault Squad and Gates of Hell. As said, the game will have 3 campaigns as well as some hinted at other single player and co-op stuff, which is hopefully going to be more to people's likings. For now, I would love to hear what you guys think about what I said and how you feel about the game. Now, it's been a few days since the playtest. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.